Show, where we provide you with food for thought. The Lunchroom, a show that serves a mix of subjects, chatting with the personalities in and out of the news, developments, business, politics, technology, and the arts. In the Lunchroom, you'll get a taste of everything that's adding flavor to St. Lucia. The Lunchroom, weekdays after the news from 12:45 to 2 p.m. Only on RCI. Only on RCI.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Lunchroom on Radio Caribbean International. It is Tuesday, the 20th of April, 2021. That's 4:20 out there for those of you who are into that special day. And of course, this is Lunchroom, brought to you, of course, with the kind compliments of Radio Caribbean International. I'm your host, Calixte Jr. This is program number 514. And of course, you can get us at our website, rcistlucia.com. We're also streaming via our Facebook page. Just search for the official page of Radio Caribbean International and be sure to like and share that with your friends and family. In a little while, you can perhaps call in. Our number is 4523046. Again, 4523046, as well as our WhatsApp number 724-0008. And as our guest today is political commentator, lecturer of political science, Mr. Dennis Pringa. So we're speaking with him about politics and what's going on, or his thoughts, his views on where we stand today. But a bit of history for today. Well, birthday wishes first, going out to Dr. Hecker Cox over in the United States. We do hope that you're having a wonderful birthday indeed. And in history, very interesting day for science. First and foremost, the first pasteurization test was completed by Louis Pasteur and Claude Bernard back in 1862. As well, in 1902, Marie and Pierre Curie isolate the radioactive compound radium chloride. In 1920, the Balfour Declaration recognizes Palestine as a British mandate, and of course we know the trouble in the Palestinian region up to today. In 1999, Columbine High School massacre, the Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold killed 13 people and injured 24 others before committing suicide at Columbine High School in Colorado. And unfortunately, that trend continues up to today. It's also today is also in the year 1611, the first known performance of Shakespeare's tragedy Macbeth. And that occurred at the Globe Theatre, or the old Globe Theatre in London. And that was very interesting indeed. Now, as well, it's also the birthday, if he was still alive, of Adolf Hitler. So, another very nice day in that regard. And now, of course, we move on to our dish of the day. The Daily Dish is brought to you the kind compliments of our good friends at Tiles Plus.
One tiles for your home, I see. Bathroom, kitchen, pantry. Need tiles for your balcony. Come down to Tiles Plus, satisfaction guarantee. Tiles Plus, Tiles Plus, Tiles Plus. Big tiles with unbeatable cost. Customer service, A+. Need all kind of tiles. Come down to Tiles Plus. We are so glad, gasway and vanity. Box, doors, you'll see. Come down, don't mind nobody. We got the best tiles on island. Trust me. We are located Land Street in Castries, Bosses Grozile, and Flag Street in Beaufort. Telephone number 453-7939. Tiles Plus.
Serving now, the Daily Dish.
And welcome back to our dish of the day. And of course, some of you would have caught the funeral of His Royal Highness, the Duke of Edinburgh, and that occurred on Saturday over at Windsor, to the west of London, at St. George's Chapel. And of course, that placed a lot of memories there for the royal couple. A younger Elizabeth would have met the Duke of Edinburgh, who is now Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip Mountbatten, at that location many decades ago. And I forgot to mention that it actually is the birthday of Queen Elizabeth II. She's celebrating her actual birthday today, not her official birthday, which is later on in June, but she was actually born today. And so, of course, very bittersweet, no doubt, celebrating her 95th birthday without her consort of many, many decades, His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh. Now, coming to St. Lucia, of course, the Senate meets today, and a continuation of the debate on trying to pass the appropriation bill for 2021-2022. And of course, we can still see a number of politicians are making the rounds and still speaking regarding the issue of the economy. Of course, a very, very difficult time indeed all around the world, but particularly so in the Eastern Caribbean, in countries that are highly dependent on tourism for their sustenance. And no doubt in the case of St. Lucia, nearly a fifth of our GDP wiped out in a matter of months as a result of that drop in economic activity amongst those sectors which are very much geared and tied towards tourism. I mean, it was so steep that when you think about it, every year you will hear politicians coming and speaking about the growth rate was this amount and that amount. And that, of course, is based on the estimates that are tallied for the gross domestic product. And that's a calculation that is done trying to tally the entire amount of economic activity across every single sector in the country. Now, in fact, that sometimes remember, it's an estimate. And in fact, there are different methodologies that are used, the different ways of trying to figure it out. And of course, that will sometimes come up with different numbers. So, for instance, we were at one point looking as much as a potential drop in our GDP of about 26%. That was an early estimate in October of 2020. From the Ministry of Finance. From what we're seeing, the published data from the Economic and Social Review has placed that number at 20.4%. So effectively, a wiping out of about a fifth of the size of the economy. And if you were to think back to say, well, when were we that size roughly? You'd have to go way back. I mean, I don't even think we have the data included within the Economic and Social Review, because certainly the estimated size of St. Lucia's economy as at that end of December 2020 was 4.4 billion Eastern Caribbean dollars. Now, when you look back, in 2006, we were at 4.6 billion Eastern Caribbean dollars. So you're seeing that you've got to go way, way back, over 15 years for sure, to be able to actually find when we were at that point in terms of overall economic activity. And of course, as you can appreciate, we also have what is seemingly a growing population as well. And of course, quality of life has gone up. So it certainly, once you have that extensive impact, we can certainly see that there was a major impact on livelihoods, quite possibly on issues of poverty, more persons finding it much more difficult to make ends meet. Now, just a very quick breakdown in terms of what the numbers look like for each sector in real terms, in terms of the actual size of what was lost. For instance, agriculture, roughly, we were somewhere at about the size of our agricultural sector as a contribution to GDP was in the pre-COVID period 103.5 million, and that went down to 93.6 million. So you saw a difference of about $10 million there in terms of agriculture. Also, manufacturing went down a fair bit as well, from about 180 million to about 160 million. Construction even went down, surprisingly, and a lot of persons were thinking that as a result of all the work that was going on, we would have seen perhaps at least a leveling off of construction, and maybe it would have even been worse. But it moved from about 201 million to 181 million dollars. Now, where we had a major dip, and those were sectors that are driven by tourism, the shrinking in the case of our accommodation and food services sector, which is largely your hotels and restaurants, that shrank by $703 million. Another major sector, as a result of shrinkages and lack of operation of the taxi sector, the transport and storage subsector, that went down by nearly $100 million. As well, another major sector, travel agents and tour operators, that also went down by about $45 million. The only sector that seems to have the three primary sectors that actually seem to have maintained a growth pattern for the year 2020 were the sectors of communications, and in particular telecommunications. And perhaps one can understand why, because we did see the demand for people reaching out and for talking more. More people, of course, had to get on the internet. They definitely had to get service going. So there was an expansion in the telecommunications sector. And of course, telecommunications also includes the ICT sector. And a lot of those call centers, we did see some expansion of call centers as well. Again, in keeping with that global trend, as more people stayed home, you had to reach them, you had to be able to connect with them. And so more businesses were looking towards shifting their telemarketing and a lot of their operations in that way. So we saw a global rise, but as well, certainly in St. Lucia, we were benefiting from that trend. The financial services sector seemed to have continued to operate above par, and we saw some expansion there, as well as in real estate, interestingly enough. Now, of course, another major sector that was impacted was that of arts, entertainment, and recreation. Of course, that's the creative industries, persons who would definitely have been very active for Carnival and for a number of these various festivals. Significant decline in that sector, and by nearly $60 million. And so that sector, when you think about it, it shifted from about, it was about 180 million, and it went down to about 120 million. So very interesting to look at and to see the impact of what particular sectors were largely affected as a result of COVID-19. The health sector stayed very flat, as you could well imagine, not very much change there, and a small dip in education and some expansion, of course, in the public administration over that period of time. So that actually grew, and that also contributed to our GDP. But in the long and short of it all was a significant decline in economic activity. That's our dish of the day. When we come back, we're going to be touching base with Mr. Dennis Springer.
This has been The Daily Dish.
One tiles for your home, I see. Bathroom, kitchen, pantry. Need tiles for your balcony. Come down to Tiles Plus, satisfaction guarantee. Tiles Plus, Tiles Plus, Tiles Plus. Big tiles with unbeatable cost. Customer service, A+. Did all kind of tiles. Come down to Tiles Plus. We also got glassware and vanity. Books, doors, you'll see. Come down, don't mind nobody. We got the best tiles on island. Trust me. We are located Land Street in Castries, Bosses, Grocery Lanes, and Slack Street in Beaufort. Telephone number 453-7939. Tiles Plus.
And welcome back to the lunchroom. It is 3 minutes before the hour of 1 o'clock. And we're going to go to a time check in just a bit. But of course, we have been studying and observing what has been going on for the past year, and of course maybe 5 years, you can even argue, as we are now, I think, somewhere around 4 years and 10 months into the current administration's term of office. And a number of people are looking, and of course the political pundits are looking and seeing what is going on. We heard, of course, from one, Mr. Peter Wickham, who was suggesting more than likely that we would expect perhaps a later election at this point in time, even though he had recommended going to the polls early. And that would have been more advantageous to the incumbent government. But it looks like it may not be that, and we're seeing right about now a wait and see, a lot of hedging that's going on. Of course, statements coming out from Mr. Guy Joseph yesterday on a program indicating that he believed that the United Workers' Party was in play in all 17 seats, and that he was very much hopeful for even seats currently held by the opposition St. Lucia Labour Party coming across to the United Workers' Party. So lots of statements being made out there, and to try to make some good sense of it, it's certainly why I've asked Mr. Dennis Springer to be my guest today. Now, Dennis, how are you doing? How are things? Are you keeping safe?
I am fine. I'm fine. I am just looking at the pulse of the community, so to speak, of St. Lucia. As you're feeling that there is tension and people can't wait to get to the polls, and probably Wickham was right that if they had gone earlier, maybe they would have to survive one or two seats. But the way they're going right now, they seem to be waiting for, hoping that some of the projects will come to fruition, and consequently they'll have their ribbon cutting and make people believe again that they are doing something. But there is something that I've always learned, is that you can fool some of the people some of the time, but not all of the time.
Well, I mean, even the issue of projects, then, it says, of course, as you've brought it up, that seems sometimes to be more, people are not so even interested in the finished product. I think the suggestion is that many politicians will just simply want to get the project going, so that the impact, especially if it's a construction project, the impact is more in the employment, persons who may be hired to actually execute that project. Now, hold that thought in response to that, because it's actually now 1 o'clock. And that kind time check is brought to you the kind compliment of Axel Finance.
Hey, you want an easy loan, an express loan? Come down to Axel. Easy and hassle-free. Oh, yes. Come down and see. Hey, Axel get it for you and me. Set your worries free. This is guaranteed. Accelerate with Axel. Axel Finance. Loans are convenient. Axel Finance. Helping you move forward. Accelerate with Axel. Accelerate with Axel. Come get a loan at Axel. Come get a loan at Axel. Accelerate your life with Axel. Call us today on 450-8222.
And welcome back to the lunchroom. And my guest today is Mr. Dennis Springer, political commentator, lecturer of political science. Dennis, thanks so very much again for joining us here at the lunchroom. And we were just talking about this whole idea of projects. Of course, it does seem that we seem to have a love affair of projects, in particular construction projects, as some sort of mark or determinant as to how governments will be selected or not. Do you think that these projects, as you're talking about, whatever they may be, will redound to the benefit of the government? And would that wipe away a lot of concerns over good governance?
No, I don't think so. Because I will tell you, to begin, even the road project seemed to be getting on a lot of people's nerves, and it is people even more angry. But yes, the project is one thing, but the thing that I have found with lots of people, and the government doesn't seem to understand that, is that the things that the government went through was the cobalt fiasco. People are so angry because lots of people would love to get from, say, for example, so that they can, produce food for themselves or to sell. And when they realize that so much land has been to a particular person who's made so much money out of it, and the money borrowed was from the national insurance company, could have, which they themselves could have bought the land and sell it and make a huge profit. For everywhere I pass, they're talking about this cobalt so-called fiasco.
Right.
You know, I mean, so the idea of road works and so to speak will enlighten people to go and vote for the government at the present moment is like pie in the sky.
Now, I Cabot on Mr. Rick Wayne's program sometime last week. Giving the Cabot side of the story, but a little bit of incongruence there, because we did hear from the chair of the of National Insurance Corporation, and he did say at a press conference that Cabot was in fact experiencing difficulty in raising the money to actually purchase the property, and that was in fact why they were called in, they were stepped in to make that investment, so to speak, by providing Cabot with that 27 million EC dollar loan. I mean, everybody is saying that, but why would it make any sense for NIC, which was interested in that property themselves, if Cabot was not able to raise the money, and even if they may have had a sort of a pre-commitment or whatever the case may be, that could have timed out, so to speak, and they could have then moved in and actually purchased the property on their own right.
Calixte, so why would a billionaire, that's how he described, want to borrow 30 million or to 30 million from the NIC? I find that story a little. Well,
that's because that story is not true, Dennis. That the gentleman is not a billionaire. So. In fact, he even how he actually got he's an entrepreneur, one may say,
exactly.
and how he got his first golf course. It was highly subsidized by the Canadian provincial government over in Nova Scotia. He got the land, I think, for $1. The entire area that was his first golf course was provided to him at $1.
Are you talking about ESH now?
No, almost sounds very much like ESH.
No, I'm just using that. Isn't that really amazing?
But you see that I suppose the difference there is that he's a Canadian and he's getting a benefit in Canada, as opposed to DSH, where we have St. Lucian land being provided to a non-national, whereas St. Lucians, cannot access that land at the same rates. So clearly, I think that is really where the big difference is. But it seems as well, I mean, we're seeing a lot of these types of issues, whether it's with Cabot. Even before Cabot, we were seeing issues such as the purchase of government going out and acquiring a number of properties which seem to have lost interest. The Shock Bay lands, Mount Pima lands, government going out there ostensibly to purchase them in the name of touristic developments. And it seems very much, consistent with a kind of pattern that we've seen even going back to around 2007, 2008, where we saw that Dyer Mall purchase as well.
Exactly.
And that's back. That's back as well, isn't it?
Exactly. And you tell me that you can sell it, something that you bought under Stevenson King for 30-odd million, and you're now selling it at 13 million. That's what I've heard.
13.
Now,
okay.
The point is, if that is so, well, it looks as though land prices have depreciated considerably. Because you can knock off the building, knock down the building, the land would be still very valuable.
Yeah.
So that does make sense to me.
Well, and it's a very interesting situation, because then we're also being told within that context as well that the government is going to possibly rent part of it. We're hearing about the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court being placed inside of there. Right. Very strange location, I would say. I'm not sure. You've traveled quite a bit, Dennis. Have you ever seen a Supreme Court in a mall?
No, I've never heard. Life, and I've been nearly all over the world. The point is, I think that what is happening with this present Prime Minister is that he's coming up with far-fetched ideas, thinking that people here that stupid that they will drink, the dirty wine that he's putting out. And that is how I see it. It is the same that we have just heard with Lucian. I think that the Prime Minister seemed to be on every show. Why don't we hear the other ministers apart from Guy and himself? Are they the two people that run the government, that run the country? I find that is that some of the things that we are hearing it's almost sort of far-fetched, or that we are really stupid, that we drink everything that they give us. This is the form of dictatorship, as far as I'm concerned. And I wrote something on Caribbean News Global recently, and it is clear that what I wrote is the truth. It's what I feel, and and I think people should read the Caribbean News Global a little bit more because a lot of the things that the articles really hit at the root of some of the problems. The only thing that I didn't touch in that particular article was the social problems that we have, and I think that I leave that for closer to the elections.
Dennis, I mean, you use a very strong word there, dictator. And of course, it's kind of hard sometimes for people to understand exactly what that is. I mean, we hear about persons who are dictators out there, and maybe might think about Mussolini or Hitler.
Putin is a classical case. The chap in Brazil is another one. You know what I mean?
Bolsonaro.
These are the sort of people that think that they can do what they want, and you have to accept it because they are the so-called rulers.
But it seems to be a very popular type of stance, though, that we see a number of countries going for this style of governance,
of
leadership. Yes, indeed. Sorry, strong man type. Say it as it is type of people. They seem to be a lot more attractive to persons who say they don't sound like politicians. They sound like free spirits, free thinking people. It's attracting a lot of people around the world. I mean, we saw Trump, for instance, who at one point in time, I think back in 2016, he only had 8%.
That's right.
In the polls.
Yes. Yes. But the point is, there are people, say for example, within society right now, who want to cling on to something, and that's what it is. And they're almost like horses who have blinkers on. And they just focus right ahead of them. They don't look to see what is coming at their sides or anything like this, or what is more interesting that way. They see something and they think, let's go. And then later on in their lives, they're disillusioned because that what they thought was not. And consequently, that is when they get very violent, And we are seeing that right now.
And do you think that explains to a certain extent the sort of treatment of the media? I mean, we've saw that. You mentioned Stanley Lucian, for instance, and we saw what happened last week.
Quite.
Statements, you should be ashamed of yourself for making a statement like that. And that was almost a repeat of the treatment given to Mr. Rehani Isidore when we had this whole issue of the visit of Prince Harry. And he was being asked effectively, well, what's the arrangement right about now with respect to that? Are they going to be staying at Coco Palm? I think that was a question that I think Mr. Isidore was trying to get across. And
exactly.
And the treatment there was not a, a yes or no type of answer. It was an attack against the journalist.
You tend to forget the treatment of I call it to his poodle, to the NBC news
Mr.
reporter.
Miguel Favre. Well, I mean, and there are many others. I mean, there was also the Janika Simon as well. She didn't want to take, I think, both the Prime Minister and the Minister of Economic Development, Guy Joseph, did not want to actually answer questions that were being posed. I think at that time, it was actually about national health insurance, and she was asking a very pointed question about that. But it within that context, though, it seems as if we still are not really getting to any point where there's any real large outrage amongst the population. And how do you explain that, Dennis?
Well, to be honest with you, I have a feeling, and I felt it like this in the tree, that people their minds ages. that their poll and Wickham poll has shown that people had already made up their minds. I never experienced that in St. Lucia. People are telling you, I really don't want to know. I really don't want to know because I'm too here. Already made up my mind. There are one or two things in the earlier life of this administration that has tended to a lot of people off, and they have made up their minds whether they're going to vote for government or just abstain from voting because, in essence, they may not want to vote for Labour. But you know, the way they to people is that if you look at, and I look at just one thing, that is looking at Chasney and looking at Philip J. Pierre. They were both ministers of tourism, and here is a classical way that we can compare them. Alan has told us that he was going to build so many hotels. 8 hotels, I think.
Oh, it's been more than that over the years, eh?
There you are. And under Pip, who is not even a businessman, and this guy is supposed to be part and parcel of a business fraternity with his father and what have you. Tell me the hotel that he has built in St. Lucia. Yet, Minister of Tourism for nearly 5 years. What has he built? He's been minister for nearly 5 years. What has he built? You know, in terms of hotels. Right. Yet we are hearing all the time hotels. This will be built. That will be built. Nothing has come to free. But under Philip J. Pierre, the hotels have been built. Not only that, but if you talk about the sleaze that is going on, I have any sleaze with Philip J. Pierre. At least he has integrity, and that's what I judge people on. Whether he can lead and whether he has integrity or whether he's a trustworthy person, I'd rather now in my life in St. Lucia for my children trust Philip. Yeah.
Do you think, Dennis? I mean, you study political science. Of course, there's a lot of psychology in that too, trying to understand individuals. Do you think that where we are at as a people, this is actually exposing a lot of underlying prejudices and preconceptions that we have held over the years? I mean, we saw that example with, again, just to go back to the United States, we saw exactly that with Trump. You know, Obama came in, first black African-American president, and then we saw that amazing right-wing pushback against Obama, the Obama administration, and many people said that there would not have been a Trump had it not been for an Obama. Effectively, Trump came out of that sort of period, and he was able to actually encourage, so to speak, that or to benefit from that swell of concern, that right swing, pretty much bigoted part of the population, and he benefited there. In the case of St. Lucia, though, of course, it's a little different in that we're majority black population. But then, of course, coming out of colonialism.
And let St. Lucians put that in their mind. We're now in the Caribbean that we talk about race to any extent than what I'm hearing here in St. Lucia about color. You know, where in the rest of the Caribbean do you hear that? Why? Because the rest of the Caribbean liberated. When a leader tells us that, you know, to an extent that what we had before from the English was a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Colonialization had a conscience.
Exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? What does that tell you? What does that tell you? Who the person is? You know, and I think the only place I blame Labour, when Kenny was in power, it was the Constitution. That should have been changed.
Right.
Because this particular Prime Minister have manipulated the so-called Constitution, the white Constitution.
But there was that play of that race issue was raised in the last election. Even before this, I remember there was this whole statement about Kenny Anthony, the Massa.
Yes, but you know who brought that out also. This present Prime Minister made it clear, and it's on the tape, it's on video everywhere, that the Massa, and he was
you can change your name, but you can't change who you are.
Kenny.
Yeah. Well, he said it. You can change your name, but you can't change who you are.
Exactly. But he's more of a master than Kenny was ever. That's a fact. A fact. And if St. Lucia's don't want to accept it, then again I say they're living in cloud cuckoo land, because this guy has done. Look, we have a National Health Service. Who is going to look after it? We have 3 people. They say the top people there. The rest are from India, the Cayman Islands. What are we talking about?
I'm glad that you mentioned this whole issue, Dennis. This issue of private involvement, and I mean we've been hearing, of course, for a very long time the importance of having private sector involvement in development, and we've been speaking about PPPs.
Yes,
but
quite.
But what we're seeing is a sort of a privatization of so many different elements in our country. I mean, we've seen it. For instance, you had an RSL, for instance, that was closed down.
Yes.
You had the St. Lucia Fish.
One of the best in the Caribbean.
Right, the St. Lucia Fish Marketing Corporation.
Correct.
That was somehow privatized without any kind of.
The Japanese paid so much to give in places like Dennery and Canary Zansley and other places.
And therefore, yeah. And of course, it was almost privatized without any sort of, public bidding. There's no process. In other words, everything is being done, and then you just hear, well, it was handed over to somebody to run, and that's that. And it wasn't. And the fishers themselves are not even the ones who are running it. Ironically enough, even though we've had cooperatives for so many decades now involved in the industry. And now we're seeing, of course, this issue not only in terms of, as you mentioned, the healthcare sector and OKEU. Again, just out of the blue, we just told, well, this company, Health City Cayman, somehow becomes the best company to fill and fit our needs without any kind of bidding, without any kind of clarity as to, well, how do we work this process through? And I'm just comparing it with what happened with the public-private partnership for the UNR International Airport. There was a whole process. There were feasibility studies that were done. There was an international third party through the International Finance Corporation, IFC, managing the process so that there was transparency. In a lot of these new deals, there doesn't seem to be a lot of transparency in the deals that are being made.
Well, to be honest with you, you're quite right there. But the problem is that what we saw with, say, for example, the public-private partnership with the airport, if that had taken place and this government had continued what was good from the last government, because remember when they came in, they curtailed everything that the last government had in place. Now, this is not democracy as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
You follow or you go ahead with what you think is good, or you make some sort of changes that would be that you think is more beneficial, but they didn't do that at all. The St. Jude case is a classical one also. We paid nearly $1 million for a report that the majority of the people in St. Lucia have not seen. That St. Jude, and they try to say that the St. Jude should have been finished under Labour, but it was nearly finished. But the point is,
well, the new line, Dennis. I'm not sure if you actually saw what Mrs. Mary Isaac has now said that timelines don't hold for St. Jude. That's her new line, actually. It doesn't matter. There'll be no more timelines.
Come up with anything and everything. And to be honest with you, if we had to rebuild St. Jude as it was, then St. Jude should have been built under King. Being built under King. But it had to do with the contractors. They didn't want a particular contractor, which was a Taiwanese contractor, and Holdier, if you want to put it bluntly.
Holdier, okay.
So they wanted their own contractor. That took a little time because the ambassador at the time, Tom Chu, would not have that particular contractor. Mm-hmm. Now these things have got to come to light. Mm-hmm. Why wasn't St. Jude finished within that period of time? It should have been finished because Holdier said, and I have the facts, that it should have been finished within 9 months.
And referring to the surgical building, which they were supposed to have gone ahead with.
But yes, quite. Yeah. You know, I mean, and when I'm hearing what I'm hearing now, this government has had nearly 5 years. You said 4 years and 10 months. The 6th of June will be 5 years. You're telling me that St. Jude cannot be finished? You have demolished 2 buildings there for what? To put on some clad type huge building that doesn't make sense to anyone. It for me it is really looking at us and thinking that you know, people in St. Lucia, instead of going forward, they are backward. Didn't he say that we are a mendicant society?
But coming back to the issue of, yes, he did. But coming back to the issue of the psychology of it all, it seems as if unless it involves brick and mortar, cement and steel,
Correct.
that it somehow does not count as development. And I think maybe it's something that has been ingrained or trained in our society, that this is what really matters at the end of the day. But we're seeing so many of these projects going awry. So many of these projects, St. Jude is a good case in point as well for just that. And stuck in poor delivery, it's not happening. We're seeing a lot of projects which were, as you mentioned, were already in train, they've been stopped. And then now this mad rush to begin to show that, okay, we need to deliver something. You know, is there a time, for rethinking or re-educating our population as to what development really is?
Well, first of all, we have to explain to our people, and I hate to say it, Calixte, maybe that's the first time you'll hear it. It's to explain to our people what corruption is all about. You know, you're laughing. And I think that our people have not understood
how corruption works.
Yeah, and how it works. Because at times, even they themselves are involved in it. Mm-hmm. Unknowingly to them that it is a form of corruption.
Right.
And consequently, this is what is happening. Because in bricks and mortar, you can bring in, corruption can come in, put it bluntly, at a very high level, and we seem to say after it's finished, well, it's finished, but we don't know how much it cost. You know, from the original price.
Well, we're not even told what the original price is.
We're not even told. Yeah. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So really, it is. We have to educate ourselves in what corruption is all about. Mm-hmm. Patrice Lumumba, you know, professor in Africa, the lawyer, top speaker, he says that any society that wants to go forward must get rid of corruption at any level. Mm-hmm. And Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore was all same mind. And that is why he has never understood why St. Lucia did not take on Sir Arthur Lewis's book, Industrialization by Invitation. Mm-hmm. Because he's saying that is what Singapore did. And as you said, I have traveled. I've been in the Air Force. I've been to Singapore when it was a rat hole. I say it. It was a den of iniquity, you know. But look at Singapore today.
Yeah.
You know, who would ever have believed if I tried to tell people what it was? In fact, there was a program the other day that showed you what Singapore was like. But you would say to yourself, well, that wasn't Singapore. That is something else they're showing us. Mm-hmm. But that was Singapore. But Lee Kuan Yew, if you remember the federation with Malaysia and things, he came out of the federation because he realized the federation was doing him no good. Mm-hmm. You know, that is Singapore, no good. And then he decided, but he went to the people. He listened to the people. He told them what he intended to do. It was up to them to accept or not accept. The people accept because it involves a little bit of discipline. And this is probably what we lack in this country.
You raise the whole issue of corruption, and I think it's a very important point that you're raising, particularly in terms of construction. Yes. And we've there was an interesting article, I can't remember who had written it, but it was looking at the whole issue of technology as well, and saying that you will find that for people to get involved in corruption, they will tend to go to the lowest technology, lowest form of technology, in other words. So the simplest thing to do as an investment, they will end up doing it. So they won't necessarily invest maybe in let's say a GNet or like we have right now, or they won't get involved in say a laptop program or whatnot, but they'll build roads because it's a quick and easy way to have that transaction of transfer of large sums of money.
Correct.
And so we've seen, Dennis, and this is what I'm a little concerned about. Across the Caribbean, we've seen corruption. We've heard of Piarco International Airport.
Yes.
We've seen, the issues, hundreds of millions of dollars gone down the drain, disappeared. We know about it, but yet still we're so quiet about an international airport project, right, where you had a transparent PPP that thrown out, a change of plans, new designs, and $600 million in loans.
Yes.
And yet still it's quiet. It's crickets from the chambers of commerce and various institutions out there as to what's going on, and very, very little transparency. We don't even know what the final cost of that project is to a day like today.
And well, the point is, Calixte, at times one wonders how many people have their hands in the pot, and at times that is my fear. How many of those people have their hands in the pot? But there is another thing that I want to say very quickly, Calixte, and this is why I think that people have got to be educated sufficiently. It seems as though our educational system has gone backwards instead of forward. And because of that, it is very difficult to try and educate people to the types of things that are important, like corruption, and to try and explain that to people, because our people are blindfolded. Look at you hear election, they're going to be passing money. And I heard someone says, well, they've helped me, although I'm a Labour, but I've promised them I will vote for them if they help me. And I'm thinking to myself, are you voting for yourself, the I, or the we? That is St. Lucia. Doesn't St. Lucia come first on its development? I think that is the education that I'm talking about. How to educate our people to say that we can never be a developed country if we keep thinking of the I. It has to be we. It has to be for the youth of tomorrow, their children, for them, and their children, and their children's children. This is what we have to be looking at. How can we develop this country? Not just for us, but for generations to come. And I don't think that sort of education is being put out there. So when we talk about corruption, they don't understand what corruption is.
Right.
They'll never understand it,
right.
Because it is the I syndrome and not the we.
Yeah, very, very well said, in fact. But then again, though, what I'm wondering, though, and I guess maybe we just haven't learned the lesson, because, you hear that phrase sometimes, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me.
Exactly.
But it seems as if we're seeing a repeat of certain things. I mean, we had this whole issue of that first attempt at the Hiwanora International Airport redevelopment. There was a whole issue of companies being formed, A&M. You had the Ascenza gentleman who got involved. You had the allegations of rigging of the bidding process. We saw lots and lots of confusion with respect to that, investigation going into the matter, and then yet still, a new government comes, and it's as if, well, let's just forget it ever happened, and let's go straight back into this idea that we must have this project, and I think, again, it comes back to that idea of what development is. We flag this idea of this grandiose legacy project of an airport that somehow makes it all right.
But it's not only that, Calixte, because a lot of people thought that when they had thrown out the PPP, that they had gone to Taiwan, that the money that they would be borrowing from Taiwan would be to do the airport per se. But now we know that the money they borrowed from Taiwan is only to build the structure of the airport, the so-called
terminal.
London site, so to speak, is where the other money has now been borrowed from the Caribbean banks. You know what I mean? But when this was first mentioned, you never heard that. If we had gone through the PPP, we would not be having this sort of nonsense. It's 2 sets of money being borrowed.
Well, three
now.
Actually. Three sets.
Oh, three sets.
And you're very correct about that, because at first we were told many times we were getting monies from the Taiwanese, and this was a loan, and it had so many times we were told that yes, the loan was just signed, and it was
exactly.
I think originally supposed to be $150 million US, and then it became $100 million US, and then of course we then found out, well, there's another loan of 202.5 million EC dollars from regional and local banks.
Yes.
And then another amount, I think, out of the World Bank.
That's right,
as well.
correct.
So it's at least at this point in time,
but
3 sets of loans, and we don't even know what the final cost is.
But Calixte says the education. That's why I'm talking about the education. Why were not these things mentioned from the word go? Why we keep hearing after one thing is done, then we hear another thing, and then when you say, like you said to the Taiwanese, oh, but I thought that the money that was no, the money was just for the building. For the London site, it's another set of money. For the other thing, another set of. And I'm saying that this cannot be right, because the PPP, we would not be doing that.
Exactly. Dennis, you're going to have to hold your thoughts for just a little while. Perhaps go get a water break, because we're due for our weather news. We'll be right back just after this.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Calixte. The weather report at this hour is made possible with the compliments of Island Style Talent Bath and Beacon Insurance.
Island Style, yeah. We got the time to make you go. We got the time to make you say, yeah. We'll have to make the right choice. Island Style, whoa. We got the time that will make you happy. Island Style, oh yeah. We make your dream come alive in Island Style.
We have tiles and thin sets, misses and ground. Everything you need to sort the house out. For the best price and the latest style, take a little drive down to Island Style Car.
We got the time to make you go. We got the time to make you say, quality, price, service, choice. It's all an Island Style.
Visit us at our showrooms in Bellarosa, Rodney Bay, on the John Compton Highway, Cass Street, and Latoni, Viewport. Or call us on 450-452 or 453-TILE. Island Style Tile and Bath. When you think tile, think Island Style.
What makes a strong team? Supporting each other, sharing successes and disappointments, learning from one another. Get a Be Better health plan from Beacon and get simple and affordable medical benefits so you can build a better team. Call 458-5860 or log on to beacon.co.tt for more information.
This is Radio Caribbean International. It's now time for the weather news.
And now, a look at the latest weather report as of 12 noon today. It's the 20th of April, 2021, and the forecast of this hour is Thomas Auguste. The present weather at Huronora is fair, and at George Charles, it's partly cloudy. Present temperature at Huronora, 29 degrees Celsius or 84 degrees Fahrenheit. Last night's minimum temperature at Huronora was 24 degrees Celsius or 75 degrees Fahrenheit. The wind at Huronora is blowing from the east-northeast at 20 miles per hour or 31 kilometers per hour. After a 24-hour period ended at 8 a.m., 0.8 millimeter of rainfall was recorded at Huronora and only 0.1 millimeter of rainfall was recorded at George Charles. The total rainfall for the month of April thus far stands at 22.8 millimeters at Huronora, 20.8 millimeters at George Charles. Sun will set today at 18 minutes after 6 and rise in the morning at 14 minutes before 6. Now, for the forecast for St. Lucia valid for the next 24 hours. The winds will be blowing between the east, northeast and the east near 20 miles per hour or 31 kilometers per hour with a few gusts. And weather fair, hazy and breezy, becoming cloudy at times with a few showers. A recap again of the forecast for St. Lucia, valid for the next 24 hours. The winds blowing between the east, northeast, and the east, near 20 miles per hour or 31 kilometers per hour with a few gusts. And weather, fair, hazy, and breezy, becoming cloudy at times with a few showers. Now to the marine forecast for seas in a 25-mile or 40-kilometer radius from St. Lucia. For the Castries Harbour, the low tide will be at 11 minutes before 5 this afternoon. High tide will be at 8 minutes before midnight. And the Vieux Bay's low tide will be at 16 after 6 this evening. And the high tide will be at a minute before 1 in the morning. The seas are moderate to locally rough. The waves 5 to 7 feet, the same as 1.5 to 2.1 meters in open waters. Small craft operators and sea bathers, you are advised to exercise caution due to brisk winds and locally rough seas. Please be guided accordingly. For the Lesser Antilles, it's fair to partly cloudy, hazy, and breezy with a few scattered showers. And the weather summary. The Atlantic high-pressure system will continue to generate moderate to brisk easterly winds and rough seas around our region during the next 24 hours. And low-level moisture and instability will cause a few brief showers over the eastern Caribbean region during the next couple of days. And the La Soufrière volcano in St. Vincent remains active, and additional eruptions and ash plumes are possible at any time. Interest in St. Lucia and the southern eastern Caribbean region, you are advised to continue monitoring official information from reliable media outlets for updates as far as that is concerned. So recap again of the weather summary. The Atlantic high-pressure system will continue to generate moderate to brisk easterly winds and rough seas around our region during the next 24 hours. And low-level moisture and instability will cause a few brief showers over the eastern Caribbean region during the next couple of days. And a reminder that the La Soufrière volcano in St. Vincent remains active. And additional eruptions, like we've been seeing in the past couple of days, and ash plumes are possible at any time. Interest in St. Lucia and the southern eastern Caribbean region, we are advised to continue to monitor official information sources, of course, reliable media sources and outlets for updates as far as that is concerned. A reminder again for small craft operators and sea bathers to exercise caution due to brisk winds and locally rough seas. That's the official weather report at this time. Join us again in the morning at around 6:30 for our next report from the Met Service. Thank you, Thomas, for providing the update at this hour. The weather was made possible by Island Style Talent Bath and Beacon Insurance.
This has been RCI's Weather News. For more information, call the Weather Hotline at 454-3452. RCI 101 number 1.
Island style. Oh, yeah. We got the time to make you go. Oh. We got the time to make you say, yeah. We'll have to make the right choice. Island style. Whoa. We got the time that will make you happy. Island style. Oh yeah. We make your dream come alive in Island style.
We have tiles and insets, pieces and ground. Everything you need to sort the house out. For the best price and the latest style, take a little drive down to Island Style Car.
We got the time to make you go. Oh. We got the time to make you say, yeah. Quality, price, service, choice. It's all an Island Style.
Visit us at our showrooms in Belarus, Rodney Bay, on the John Compton Highway, Castries, and Latuni, Viewport. Or call us on 450-452 or 453-TILE. Island Style Tile and Bath. When you think tile, think Island Style.
It's what's inside that counts. Inside your house, that is. With Beacon, you can ensure everything inside your home with our Easy Buy contents packages. Just click, match, and buy to cover your furniture, electronics, appliances, clothing, kitchen items, and much, much more. For maximum peace of mind with minimum fuss, log on to beacon.co.tt and choose your package today. Call us at 458-5860 for more info today.
And welcome back to the lunchroom. And before we go back to Dennis, just a few birthday wishes going out to Miss Tresha Lionel. Happy birthday to you, Tresha. Quite a few people are born on April the 20th. And interestingly enough, Miss Dania George, happy birthday to you as well. We do hope that you're having a wonderful day. It's also the birthday of Mrs. Alana Raymond. Happy birthday to you. We do hope that it is wonderful indeed, as well as Mr. Benson Tertullian. Happy birthday to you, sir. Have a great one. And also birthday wishes going across the Atlantic to Mr. Bertram Leo. We do hope that you're having a great day day indeed, sir. Now, Dennis, welcome back. Thanks for holding the line.
Yes.
And now, I want to deal with a little bit, Dennis, with the whole issue of this, what seems to be a sort of a double standard in maybe treatment between an Alan Chasney and a Philip Pierre. I'm seeing a lot of interest being placed by some people. Philip Pierre, is he married? Is he not? But then we're not seeing that same sort of interest with respect to the Prime Minister, or other persons who've held that office. And I was making the point, for instance, I think Mr. Stephenson King was not married when he became a Prime Minister. I think even John Compton was not married when he became Premier of the country. I think Dr. Kenny Anthony was on to his second wife when he became Prime Minister. Mr. Chasney is on to his second wife as well. But why this interest about Mr. Pierre and his personal life versus others?
Alex, not cutting you short. They seem to be looking for all excuses. The idea that you heard what a particular person said in terms of Kule Wayayai or some rubbish like that. Now, to be honest with you, as far as I'm concerned, Pierre has been minister for quite a few years. He's been in Parliament 5 times. If we don't know about him by now, it shows that people have not been interested in those that represent them. Because I'm sure a lot of people should know Philip J. Pierre by now. The one thing I know, and I personally know, is that he's an honest man. A man of integrity. What has that got to do with whether he is married, whether he's not married, and all this sort of nonsense? It is just farcical, and people are looking for all sorts of excuses. Someone said to me, I don't know about Pierre. Don't forget he was with Kenny, and he never did anything. And then I realized, and this is someone that's supposed to have degree masters, and then suddenly I realized that person is not does not understand politics, especially when it deals with cabinet government. It is cabinet collective responsibility. And consequently, if you have the minority view in cabinet, it's the majority view that wins the day. So what difference that it makes that, he served with Kenny and didn't do anything, so what do you expect? I've heard so much nonsense in all my life. The point is, and you know who spreads that too? It is the United Workers' Party. It is a deliberate ploy. They think, but they're not fooling anyone. For someone to say, if it's said that they are doing so well that they might even take some of the Labour seats, they seem to be living in cloud cuckoo land, and consequently they're just making up stories because they want to reassure themselves. Because right now the omens are not good. I can tell them that, and it's time. For example, look at Barbados right now. Have you seen anything out as a plan post-COVID? No. Yet you are seeing that Barbados is giving land to farmers so that they can grow certain foodstuff, so that, after COVID, so to speak, that Barbados can feed itself. You see St. Lucia doing anything in that regard? Yes, we will give land to foreigners, yes.
Well, we did have lots of promises of giving land before. I think even in the first budget back in 2017, there was a promise of land to the Ranju farms that were supposed to be given to banana farmers. But I mean, a lot of those suggestions we seem to have sort of withered away. Some of these promises. I mean, remember, Dennis, I mean, you of course would have perhaps been very much aware about Windfresh and what is going on right about now.
I have, in fact, I have something with me right now, and that the Windfresh thing is a farce. It's comical, and it should never. We should never accept this.
And it literally got just a passing mention in the beginning of the budget speech, just to say that Yes, Windfresh is being liquidated. The assets are being sold off, and and it was as if we're moving right along.
That was telling us how much bananas that would be sending to England now.
To France, 50 to 60.
France,
overall, yes,
to
overall,
Europe,
50 to 60,000 tons.
Yes.
Of banana production by year 3. That was the promise, as well as bananas to Martinique. We're now being told, though, that the issue, I heard from the Prime Minister last night on this program, that the reason why they could not send bananas to Martinique was because there was a higher demand for bananas to the United Kingdom. And so we couldn't meet. But of course, one would have thought that if you were producing 50 to 60,000 tons, then we wouldn't have had a problem with the supply, right? It would have been a problem with getting the markets.
Calixte, you mentioned something about psychology. Yes, I teach psychology, especially in business for management and the things of that sort. But when I have heard the word pathological, I apply it now to this Prime Minister, that at times I think he does not know what he's saying. He says one thing one time, and if you remember, he said, "I did not say that we are broke." What he said, that we did not have money. Yet you go into the dictionary and it says being broke is that you don't have money. It does not make sense that he does not think of what he says. It's the same thing that with the Lucian fiasco. I mean that.
But is it because everything is a sales pitch? Is that the reason? I mean, we're trying to understand it. I mean, you could say whatever you want, and we've heard some maybe really amazing statements being made, and sometimes you do have to wonder, well, what is real and what is not. I mean, just recently, with the DSH issue, which again got absolutely no mention. I don't know if you realize that in the budget address.
Not at all. It was a waste of a budget.
But in the first budget, 2017, again, if you were just to compare that, DSH, $2.7 billion US project. It was supposed to change the South. Delivering Southern Hope was what it was called. Pearl of the Caribbean. We won't be known as Vieux-Fort again. Vieux-Fort is the ghetto. We're now going to be Pearl of the Caribbean. And fast forward to 2021, not even a mention of it in the budget.
Yeah. Well, as we know that it is things have been put out there in the hope that people will buy it and people will latch onto it, and so consequently they may change their minds if they want to vote Labour and still vote UWP. But I will tell him that a lot of UWPs will not vote for him. But they will not, maybe not vote Labour. But let us face the facts. You know what I mean? And one thing I'd love to know more about, Calixte, to be honest with you, is the canals affair.
Well,
I want to know more about this.
Yes.
Because St. Lucians must know that not many of them, if this thing ever took place under this government, that they'll ever get a job there.
Well, it's a small colony under construction down there, I think, when you think about it. You're seeing these barrack-style residential blocks being put up, very much similar to what we see on a number of Chinese construction sites around the world.
Correct.
And I think it's fairly clear that the intention is to bring in the labor force for the construction of this project.
Exactly.
Now,
and what I want to know, Calixte, is the land. Who bought that land for that? What has been built there? You know what I mean? And how much that land cost? All these sorts of things. This has not come out in the public domain. We need to know the facts.
Yeah, and I as you say so, I mean, it really does feel again like everything is. We've been through the 1.0 and we're now going through the 2.0 of it, because it feels a lot like what happened with the Black Bay situation. Remember the Black Bay lands and the Roebuck properties, and that went in, the land was lost because it was put in as part of equity into the company, some joint venture company, and we ended up losing the land. And those canal lands were actually also associated with that. As well, and now we saw range. So we but it's so difficult though, Dennis. How does one? I mean, without having whistleblowers, without actually doing a lot of I suppose, investigative journalism, but it's difficult. We still have not even seen, after 4 years and almost 9 months, that signed DSH agreement.
There you are.
Officially, we have not seen an official document. I mean, we've been told many times that the agreement would be published, it will be put out there, and then every time when a document is has surfaced, and we say, well, okay, this is the DSH agreement. We say, oh no, that's not the DSH agreement. That's not what it is.
But Calixte, doesn't that really take us back to colonization and the constitution that we have? The Constitution was never made for this modern day world of St. Lucia or for the black man, so to speak. This is a white man's constitution that can be manipulated by governments, whether it's this government or any government. And it's time that is changed. That things have to be done above board, so people know what is happening. Everything now seems to be an underhand way of doing things. And the Constitution the Constitution could be broken, and we have to accept it. That is rubbish. The Constitution should be won by the people, of the people. Mm-hmm. The people of St. Lucia, not one that was thrown down our throats from Whitehall, in England.
And so you definitely think that people will rally around the need for change of government. When I say change of, not government, but change of governance.
Yes.
Change of the Constitution, better reforms.
Again, we go back to the same thing, Calixte, that we have to educate our people. I'm not seeing that, I think maybe Labour wants to do that, but I am not seeing right now, looking at the whole educational landscape, that we want to, in St. Lucia that is, when you look in Barbados, they're educating their people in that way, maybe Grenada, Jamaica. When it comes to St. Lucia, we seem to want to keep, especially this particular government, to keep people in ignorance and just feed them what we want, what they want. That cannot be so.
But then people are very tired. They're getting very, very tired of the political back and forth. We've seen swings. 2011, we saw...
Yes.
A Labour Party government come in after being ousted in 2006. In 2016, we saw another switch again.
Yeah.
We're now at a 2021. The UWP, of course, is going to be looking at their numbers. They had, I think, a 9,000 vote margin over the St. Lucia Labour Party. 37,000 votes to about 46,000 votes.
Yeah, because people were looking for the way they were looking at it, and to be honest, a lot of people became anti Kenny, and that was where the swing came about. If you look, it was not really anti-Labour, so to speak.
Right. But do you think? And I mean, this is the thing. You're speaking, of course. A lot of people saying they just won't go out to vote. They won't go out to exercise their franchise, which could work both ways, depending on who's staying home.
Because I chastise a young person that tells me, oh, both governments the governments are all the same, and consequently I'm not going to vote. But this is a guy who's probably about 24 years old, and I'm saying to him, what do you mean by that? It's better you go and vote, maybe spoil your ballot, but go and vote. It is your choice. But you cannot tell me what our forefathers fought for, the idea that they to cast a vote, and you're telling me that you're not going to vote because both governments are the same. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? They're all the same. I had this discussion about 4 days ago, and I was very angry. And I said to the young man who is supposed to have a little bit of intelligence, I said, I thought you had some form of intelligence. But to me, you sound very ignorant. Mm-hmm. To make that sort of statement. Have you really compared them? Have you really looked? But they're all the same.
And I'm asking that question again because you see, it's interesting that you're raising it. That whole issue of how do you measure? How do you go out there? Are people even interested in measuring? You hear of all governments are corrupt. All governments are involved in some sort of bobble or something like that. The back and forth, all the noise. One side accuses the other side of this, and the other side will come and accuse them of that. how do people make sense of a lot of this? It's a very difficult, undertaking for maybe a young person who's seeing what is going on, who doesn't maybe have the political history, the political awareness to make sense of what it is, and perhaps they figure that they just tune out.
Well, we then need a strong civil society and groups of people within society who is prepared to educate our young people as to what is what. Their role in society. A lot of people don't even think that they have a role to play, in the society that we are now in. And consequently, they feel somewhat rejected. They feel cast aside until elections are due. No, the point is we have to be educating our people. And when I say education, I'm not talking about academics, being an academic and things of that sort. I'm talking about teaching our people the basics of what a civil society should be about, the thing they should take in, and be aware of. These things are important, and we are not doing that. All we get is stations, a lot of people who themselves cannot educate anyone, comes on the air and just comes out with anything that they are paid to do. That cannot be right.
Do you think a lot of voters in that next election will just be transactional, that they won't really be looking at the issues? They won't really be trying to analyze what is being said to them?
I have a feeling that a lot of, as I said to you before, from talking to people for the last 2 years, I find that a lot of people have already made up their minds. For one reason or the other, they have already made up their minds. And consequently, as I've said to you before, I've never seen that before. Normally you would say that people would be a little bit fuzzy before an election. But I'm not finding that right now. What I'm finding that either you're going to get people who are going to vote for UWP, or those who are going to vote for Labour, and those who are going to tell you that they're not going to vote, or they voted Labour, UWP the last time, but they will not vote this time. And that's what I'm finding out, as far as I'm concerned. I say, personally, before you end, I've already said my mea culpa, in that sense of the word. I thought we would have change, but what we've had is going from the coal pot into the fire, and that's a fact. And anyone who don't want to accept that is living again in another world, in a dream world.
Dennis, we've already seen this government go be over the average length of a term of governments in St. Lucia, I think, which is about 4 years and 9 months and thereabouts. We're now we're going into the 11th soon, 4 years.
Very soon. Yeah.
What is your expectation? Do you believe that, some people have been asking, do you think that the Prime Minister will go beyond that sort of ceiling of June the 6th? We're hearing about maybe going up to July the 12th. Do you think he's going to go even beyond that? Because I think a government effectively has about 4 months over. Well, 1 month is, from the date of the general election, that is. They have about 4 months.
Well, Calixte, to be honest with you, that is where maybe people are a little bit not that stupid, because the longer he takes, is the worse it will get, because the frustration is there. You can go out to shop and you can see the frustration. People are angry. There is a mood that I've never felt before, and that I didn't even see. Say, for example, 3-4 months ago, if he had gone, according to Wickham, but you are seeing that more and more the moods of people are hardening, and they have already made up their minds that, and you could see that too. Here we lately, and that is not me alone who is observing that. Don't you see for yourself, the Prime Minister is virtually on every show? It doesn't matter which one.
Oh, he hasn't been here as yet, actually, Dennis.
Oh, well,
we're waiting for him here patiently.
Well, apart from this one, but that is what I find strange, because he's on some of the shows that I'm saying, why doesn't the Prime Minister allow somebody else to go and talk on these shows? Why does he want to go? Does he realize
maybe
that
the
he's the
statements,
Prime Minister?
Maybe
or
the
is he desperate?
Maybe the statements are not too very useful. Maybe they cause more harm than good. I mean, the most recent statement by Mrs. Fortuna Belrose, that has certainly been, fairly disastrous.
Well, to be honest with you, who I find that saw this even worse than we men? Women. Women are so upset from talking to people, for anyone to say that the government has to look after the 11 constituencies that voted for the government. I have never heard nonsense like that in all my life. I thought we were all St. Lucians. I thought that a government is the government of the people. It's not the government of a party per se when they come into office. Prior to that, the election, we are looking at parties. But after the election, we are supposed to come together and unite. And the government has to do something or do things that is beneficial to the country as a whole, not to its constituency. But even then, if you want to put it that way, where Fortuna probably made her mistake, I would say to her, show me what he has done that was beneficial to Denry South, for example, or to Denry, or to Canaries Ancillary, or these places. So when she's talking, she has to be careful what she's saying. If she is going to run against, say, for example, in any constituency, I find that for a woman who says that she was a deputy PS or PS, I then say to myself, is that the level of the people that were at in government, in the public service, so to speak? If that is the level of that, then the public service has a lot of rethinking, educated their people back to what the public service should be, because she has brought it down to the lowest common denominator.
Dennis, it's always lovely speaking with you, but unfortunately we are over time here at the lunchroom. Any parting thoughts from you?
The parting thoughts I say to people, if they really want to know a lot of what is happening, there is a paper they can go to on the net, Caribbean News Global. They should read that a little bit more, because the Caribbean News Global really gives you the facts, because it doesn't look to see whether it's party this or party. It's what is best for St. Lucia. And for me, and not only that, it is educational to that extent. And I think a lot of St. Lucians should read that. The people in the Caribbean should read it, because I'm sure people overseas are reading it. But what I'd like to see, Calixte, right now for St. Lucia, I'd like to see peace. I'd like to see that we concentrate for the future, technology, engineering, and I want to make sure that this government puts some plan in place to look towards post-COVID. Unless they do that, we are heading into no man's land, and consequently, we need a change of government.
Thanks very much, Dennis Springer, political commentator and lecturer of political science and other subjects, as you mentioned, of course, psychology as well. Thanks very, very much for being our guest here today at the lunchroom. Have a wonderful day.
Pleasure.
And of course, a wonderful day to all listeners. We do hope that you have a great one indeed. Stay safe and be responsible. Remember the COVID-19 protocols. We still have a little ways to go to ensure that our numbers get down to where we want them to be. Low 50, I believe, is the necessary number. So we're not there yet. So please do stay safe and have a good one. I'm your host, Calixte Jr., saying goodbye.